Today's podcast is brought to you by Precious Metals Advisor Tom Cloud. With nearly 40 years' experience in the precious metals industry, Tom Cloud offers sound advice and the best rates on precious metals. Learn more at ftmdaily.com/gold.
Friends, welcome to the Wednesday edition of Follow the Money Daily, a daily podcast dedicated to your personal, spiritual, and financial freedom. Hosted by myself, Jerry Robinson, author of the book Bankruptcy of Our Nation, publisher at ftmdaily.com, where you can find all of these shows archived for probably 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 years. Now, we used to do this show weekly. It was a Saturday show, and it became very popular, so we decided to take it to a daily format. And so I think we've only been going daily now for, I think this is our second week. And the response from you out there has been fantastic. We love to hear from you. You know, podcasting is a lonely business. I've been doing it, like I said, for 3 or 4 years. And it's just one of those things where you cannot see the person. You cannot really have any kind of real relationship with the person that you're talking to. But I know you're there. I know you're real. I know you're not a figment of my imagination. You really are out there listening to these podcasts. I see the evidence of it. And I just want to tell you, thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for letting us be a part of your life. We really enjoy what we do. And what our whole purpose here at Follow the Money is to help you. I think if I really had to boil it all down, it would really be about your mindset, helping you fully comprehend what's happening in this economy, helping you then also prepare yourself for what's coming, because all it really takes is just a little bit of scratching the surface here on what's going on in the U.S. economy, and you begin to realize that we have a mess on our hands. And that requires people like you and me to actually take preparations to do something about it, to protect our families, to protect ourselves, and that's exactly why we're here. And I'm so glad and honored to be joined by my wife each and every day here on the program. Jennifer is also our national director for the Christian Financial Advisor Network. Jennifer, it's great to have you on the program today.
Thanks, Jerry. And we have actually been doing this podcast for almost exactly 4 years. I believe our first show was the beginning of June in 2010. Yeah. And so it has been 4 years now.
We were probably saying the same thing we are saying now, that this economy is an absolute wreck. We didn't celebrate our 4-year anniversary, did we? But we need to celebrate. We need to have a really big 5th year anniversary. We're going to dive in today and talk about the GDP figures that came out. Absolute sham. And then we're going to also take some of your questions. Jennifer, don't we have several questions already?
Yes, and by the way, we want to incorporate more listener questions. So anytime you have a question you want us to answer here on the podcast, just send it to info@ftmdaily.com. Just email it over to us and include your name, where you're from, and we'll try to put it up on the podcast for you.
That's really good. You can always email us, and we'd be happy to answer your questions. Now, check this out. Something I want to ask you. For the last several months, we've been getting people who have been emailing in asking us if we would ever consider doing an annual conference or some sort of get-together. And I've thought about it on and off for the last several years. We certainly have a large audience around the country, and that would be really great to get together, bring myself, Jennifer, Precious Metals Advisor Tom Cloud, have Jay Peroni there, and then also bring in some other outside experts. We'd also have John Burrs and perhaps Tommy Cloud, who does P2P lending. And then we would also have, other guests like G. Edward Griffin, who's a friend of the show. Would probably love to have him come along, or, just pick out a handful of guys and all meet somewhere. And I've already got the perfect place in mind. I've got a place in mind that would probably be the ultimate place to meet. And that is down in Jekyll Island, in the room where the early central bankers met in, I believe, November of 1910 to discuss the creation of the Federal Reserve. And that room still sits there. It's still available. You can actually go down there and see the room. I've talked to the Jekyll Island Hotel there in the conference center, and they are very open to us actually hosting some sort of small get-together in the actual room where the Fed met. And I thought this would be a great time to get together to meet each other, put, names with faces and shake hands and make new connections, network, just have a really good time and also learn. No doubt about it, we would take some time to do some breakout sessions, talk about investing and trading and talk about gold and silver, talk about the Fed, talk about the economy, and any other topics that would be suitable. And I guess what I'm asking you is I'm just curious, how many of you would be interested in attending something like that? I know for sure I'd love to go there. I'd love to meet you in the flesh, those of you who listen. But I wonder how many of you would, hop on a plane and come out and enjoy something like that. So what we've done is we've placed a social poll on this page down below the podcast there. And it's very easy. Just click yes if that's something that you would like to do. And, you're not committing or obligating yourself. But we just really want to kind of find out what the general feeling is about a meeting, because I really think that we could really have a lot of fun and create some real lifelong relationships by doing something like this. Jennifer, don't you think that would be cool?
I do. And by the way, those who aren't familiar with exactly where Jekyll Island is, it's right off the coast of Georgia. It's a little island. You can just get there you don't have to take a boat or anything. You can just drive there. And it's actually in Tom Cloud's backyard. Those of you who have spoken with Tom Cloud, you know he's located out in Georgia. And so it would just be a great time to get together and meet the listeners, meet our FTM insiders who would be interested in coming and being a participant in something like that.
Yeah, I think it would be a blast. You'd probably fly into Jacksonville, maybe Atlanta. I'm not really sure. We'd work out all the details. I mean, there's nothing in stone right now, but I'm just curious. So please, at least today, just go down and then just hit yes or no on the social poll so we can get some sort of feedback to see whether this would be a good idea or not. Okay, let's dive right in. We got a lot to cover very quickly. First of all, there are new revisions out this morning from the Commerce Department revealing that the 1% drop in U.S. GDP figures during the first quarter was wrong. Beware these constant revisions of this government, by the way. Now the actual GDP figures for the first quarter have been sharply revised down to show the U.S. economy shrunk by 2.9%, not the paltry 1% as stated last month. Now, not only is this the U.S. economy's worst performance in 5 years, but it is also the second revision to these figures. The government first estimated back in April that the nation's total economic output for the first quarter of 2014 had grown slightly by 0.1%, just a sliver of a percent. But now they're telling us that the overall GDP figures for the first quarter on an annual rate fell by nearly 3%. Our economy is shrinking. When you take a look and you break apart the numbers, you find that consumer demand is sluggish. Export growth is not just weak, it's also declining sharply. And this brings us to the concept of GDP. For those of you who are new to economics or GDP just kind of makes your eyes glaze over. What is GDP? Well, let's give you the real quick definition. It's C plus I plus G plus EX minus IM. Well, that sounds like a barrel of monkeys, doesn't it? What does that mean? Well, C, this is a calculation. This is how you come up with the GDP. And this is very important, by the way. Very important. C equals personal consumption, consumer demand, consumer spending. Then we have I, which stands for business investment. Then we have G, which stands for government spending. And then we have net exports, which is discovered by taking the total amount of exports that the country has minus the imports that we had. And when you add all that up, you come up with a gross domestic product. And the reason why the government has been spending so much money is because they falsely believe this Keynesian ideal that says that the government must make up for any loss in business investment or in personal consumption. Therefore, the government is spending more in order to compensate for a weak consumer or a weak business investment community, or perhaps for weak export growth as we have right now. And this equation, by the way, is how the United States is able to continue the foreign demand for all of its treasury holdings. I mean, you know, when you take a look at the overall economy, you see that it's in trouble. There's no doubt about it. And these guys are already telling us now from the government, they're already estimating after they have got this so wrong so many times. Now they're estimating that the second quarter is going to be gangbusters. But Zero Hedge has a piece out this morning that exposes how they plan to pull off this stunt, and we have a link to that in the show notes today on this page. Let's see here. What else is on the agenda? China, by the way, is proposing a doubling of the size of its proposed global financial institution, the investment into it, to $100 billion, which was first at $50 billion. China is trying to develop a global financial institution that will rival the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, which Beijing fears is too heavily influenced by the U.S. This coming out of the Financial Times this morning. Wall Street Journal says that Walgreens considering moving its headquarters abroad to lower taxes. I mean, that's a hammer to fall. So now Walgreens is talking about leaving the country, moving its headquarters out to Europe to escape. Well, I think it's Europe. I don't know exactly where they're planning. I didn't read the whole story. But they want to get away to lower taxes. And so, again, we're continuing to see this move. That's only going to hurt the U.S. economy in the long run. I've got a whole stack of stuff here, Jennifer, but you also have some reader questions, don't you? Some listener questions?
I do. So we'll go ahead and get to some of those now.
Let's do it.
Okay, so the first one comes from Rhonda, and she's in Washington. Rhonda writes, Jerry, I have a 9-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. I know they will not receive a proper education in money in the public or even private school system. What is a good way to start teaching my children some of the principles you advocate?
That's a really good question. In fact, we don't really receive too many questions on how to help your children understand these principles. And I think that's so vital because kids can soak this stuff up. They understand good and bad. They understand right and wrong. And you can slowly begin to help them understand that this system that they're in is an absolute farce. And one of the things you can definitely do to help your children is to help expose them to what's really happening in the advertising segment of society. When they are pounded every single day by billboards and commercials, help them see that they're being manipulated. And I know that sounds very cynical. I know that some people don't like that idea. But you know what Jennifer and I do? We just mute the commercials. We rarely watch TV. But we just mute the commercials when they come on. Right,
Jerry. Even when we put up a YouTube video of, something like Old MacDonald had a farm, we have a 2-year-old, so we're watching Old MacDonald. When we put up a YouTube video, we even mute the little 7-second commercial before the YouTube video because that's how strongly we feel about protecting him and teaching him about the manipulation that comes from these advertisements, what we call the consumption trap, the corporations, the media, and the financial institutions.
Yeah, if you've never read our report on the consumption trap, you can download that on our website. Just go to our website and type in consumption trap, read about that. It's also something about it in our book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation. Just this concept that these bankers and financial institutions and advertisers all gather together and you become their prey, and you end up in this terrible hamster wheel, constantly trying to churn out more profits for the corporations. Meanwhile, you're just getting deeper and deeper into debt. So the consumption trap will really be beneficial for you to read if you haven't already. I also think that there's 2 basic principles that you can teach your children from a very early age. Number 1 is to not expect handouts. Now, this may seem harsh, but I think children need to learn this, or else they're going to grow up thinking that they're entitled to a job, they're entitled to a house, entitled to a car, entitled to a new flat screen TV, and all of these other things. A parent should always provide for the basic needs of their children. I'm not saying that, but what I'm talking about here are the extras. And one practical way to put this into practice would be something like commission, not allowance. Don't call it an allowance. Call it commission. Post several jobs for your children that they can do during the month on top of their regular chores, and let them know that completing these tasks go above and beyond so that they receive a commission based upon their efforts, right? Help them understand that it's directly related to their effort. You can teach a child whenever he's younger, and I'm maybe like a teenager, to learn entrepreneurship. They can mow lawns. They can bake cookies. They can make crafts. They can tutor younger children. Help them to begin to realize that the only way they're going to make money is if they create value. And they have to learn the value creation process so that they can be a contributing member to society.
Right. And Jerry, one thing that kind of goes along with this handout, kind of children thinking they're entitled to things, from a very, very early age, many parents begin saving for the child's college, or maybe for the child's wedding, or maybe for a new car. They begin saving even right when the child is born. And although I wouldn't call this necessarily a bad thing to save for these different things, but what if the child grows up and turns 18 and he wants to do something besides go to college, or wants to do something, wants to have a small wedding, or some of these other things. And also, if the child does want to go to college, but you pay for the whole thing, then that just contributes to this entitlement mentality that that child really didn't have to do anything to get his entire college paid for.
So true. And it's because a lot of people came out of a more desperate generation, and they want to give their kids more than they had when they were younger. And I fully understand the psychology, but what is it creating? It's creating a mess. I mean, we have a real big mess on our hands now. And the younger generations that's coming up, they are jaded. They're cynical. They don't like authority. And they're just not heading the right way. I'll tell you something else that Jennifer and I do, and this has been kind of a tough transition, but I think this is really powerful, and that is to make gifts at Christmas time and for birthdays instead of purchasing them. Now, I know you can't get away with that every single time. I mean, you know, if you don't plan for that ahead of time, if you don't really prepare, then that can be problematic. But I don't know how many people I've talked to who constantly, you know, they'll be doing great. They'll be getting ahead in their financial plan, and then Christmas time rolls around and they ruin it because they go out and they blow money. Why do they blow money at Christmas time? Why do they go out and spend money on credit cards? Well, because the corporations told them to. Now, I know that there's a lot of people who would say, that's not true. I go out and I buy gifts because I want to. No. Who comes out of the womb wanting to buy Christmas gifts? Nobody. You're trained to do that. You're taught to do that. You're taught to do that by society. You're taught to do that by corporations. You're taught to do that by credit card companies. They want you to prop up their industry. And so what we decided to do was, instead of propping up this whole propaganda machine with our dollars, why don't we just make something? First of all, it means something more. And second of all, it's something that we get to do and enjoy. And so like last year, for example, I went hunting. And I shot a deer, my very first deer, by the way, and brought it back and turned it into deer jerky. Everybody loved it. I gave it away as Christmas gifts, and that was great. The year before that, I sat down at my studio. I play guitar. I like to sing and play guitar. And I recorded a CD, and I gave it out to people for Christmas time, right? Let's see, what else? What else have we done?
We make board games for the smaller children.
That's true. Yeah.
That takes quite a bit of work, but it's fun. And it really is true that you can't wait until December 20th.
Right.
If you want to make gifts, you really have to start at least by June or July, because some of these things take some time and they take a lot of thought. But think about that. Would you rather receive a gift that somebody just thought about on December 20th? Mm-hmm. Or would you rather receive a gift that somebody thought about ever since July?
And handmade,
Exactly.
Handmade.
So it really is better in almost every aspect for the giver and the receiver alike. And that teaches the children that it's not just a handout. It's not just, they get magically, gifts magically appear, hundreds of them under the Christmas tree, but that you have to put time and effort into it.
We like the envelope system too. I don't know if Larry Burkett first came up with that. God rest his soul. One of the great gentlemen who really paved the way for stewardship, biblical stewardship, financial stewardship. And either he or somebody else around him created the envelope system. And Jennifer, share with our folks about that, because that really helps. Because look, when the money's not in the envelope, there's no money left. And kids need to know that. They need to see that there's not this money tree that's sitting in the backyard that we just go pluck money off of. That actually there's a budget. And if we want them to budget, we have to model it for them.
Right. So for the adults in the family, you create a grocery envelope, maybe an eating out envelope, an entertainment envelope, et cetera, and you put your budget in there in cash. And then when the cash is gone, you don't do anything else in that category for the rest of the month. You eat what you already have at the house. The other thing is for the children, you can give them a few different envelopes, and maybe one of them says savings, and part of the money that they receive goes into savings. Maybe they have an envelope that says giving, and part of their money goes into that one. And then another one says, spending, because of course the children will want to spend some of their money. That's natural. And so you allow it. You don't make them save every penny, because that's not realistic. But so adults can definitely have an envelope system to model, and that's mostly for their expenses. And then the children can have an envelope system to sort of separate their money into different categories.
Saving money is such a good strategy for kids. And, because kids are bombarded with just as many marketing ploys as adults. In fact, if not more, if you turned on some of these, we don't even have cable. We watch very selective things, but I mean, just the stuff that these kids are exposed to. I remember whenever I was growing up, I saw, things like Scooby-Doo, and I saw, Speed Racer. And I'm just thinking about some of these old cartoons. But these cartoons today that kids are seeing, I mean, I'm telling you, some of that stuff is scary. I mean, not just manipulative, but I mean, just spooky. So it's not good, probably in some reasons for that, but also for the fact that it puts off this attitude, or puts us off this idea that kids can just have whatever they want. And everything's great when they spend money, and all they have to do is buy it and they'll be happier. Yeah, it's the same thing we learn when we're adults.
Is it just me, or does it seem like on every kids show, the kids kind of rule over, or they're always making fun of the parents? The parents are the goofy ones. They're the ones that don't know anything. And the kids are the smart ones, the ones who can control the parents. Well, is it just me, or
yeah, I've seen that. And I'll tell you what else to watch out for, with your kids are these, innocent, quote unquote, innocent iPad apps that are coming out, and these innocent, games that are teaching kids about money. You better pay real close attention to who's creating these things. Most of them are being created by the financial institutions. Who wants to teach your kids how to spend money? Well, the banks want to teach your kids how to spend money. They want to teach them that what you got to do is you got to open up a bank account, and you got to put all your money into it, and you got to keep putting money into it, and you got to leave it there for the banker. And that way that the banker can give you interest. And whoa, hold on. I don't want the banks teaching my kids about money, because I guarantee they're going to teach them the system that is currently breaking down. They're going to teach them the system that I don't want my child to know.
The only thing I learned really about money when I was in high school, I remember this. When I was in 12th grade, they sent over the vice president of the local bank to have a conference for all of the seniors to teach us about how to handle our money. They sent over a representative for bank, and that's how I learned about money, quote unquote, even though, as most people have heard me say, I really didn't learn the truth and the hidden history of the money and the Federal Reserve until I was out of graduate school.
Yeah, and you got a finance degree, a master's degree in finance, and even there, you didn't learn some of the most important lessons that you were going to need to learn to be able to protect yourself from this economic collapse that we're in. So it's challenging. If you got little kiddos, little tykes running around, and they're obviously just regular economic actors. They're rational economic creatures. They have unlimited wants and limited resources to satiate those wants. So you have to teach them which of those wants are legitimate and which ones have been imposed upon them by a society that wants to rip them off and put them into a position where they have to work for the rest of their life for somebody else in order to pay for the things that the corporations want to sell them, right? So many people today are desperate. They want to desperately get out of their job. They hate their job, but they can't. And you know why? Because they bought the lie. They bought the lie from society that said you have to outsource everything. You've got to outsource everything. You have to pay for everything. And if you go back just 100, 200 years, you find that we were much more self-sufficient. We were much more prepared for any kind of disaster. Now we're sitting ducks. If something were to happen, think about the worst case scenario. I know I'm kind of flipping channels here. I'm moving from kids to nuclear bombs now. How about that? That's a shift. But you know what I really believe? I believe in the next 24 months. I really believe this. I told Jennifer this, and I recently told somebody else this. I really believe within the next 24 months, we're going to see some major, major disaster here in the United States. I really do. And I think it's going to expose the fact that so many people are not prepared. They're not ready. They're not ready. They're not ready for anything to rock the boat. They're not ready. I saw a story the other day that 1 out of 4 Americans have no savings. And you see headlines like that all the time. But just right now, I thought to myself, really? Right now, in the middle of all of this crisis, there's still 25% of Americans, probably more, that's probably low, they don't have a dime in savings? I'm speechless. I'm speechless. Who works and doesn't save money, right? Who does? You go to Japan or you go to China and you find the savings rate are close to 40%. And then, of course, you come here to the United States and that's not what you see.
Right. And if you're not saving money, you're giving it to somebody. You're giving it to somebody else. You have to be. It only makes sense. You're giving it away to bill collectors, to stores, to restaurants. Of course, everyone has to give their money away to the grocery store, pretty much, unless you're growing your own food. But think about that. If you're not saving any money, 1 out of 4 Americans, they're giving away every penny they worked for to somebody else.
Every single penny. Every penny. And if you teach your children that, they're going to do the same thing. And the vicious cycle just continues over and over and over again. Over and over again. So
we spent a lot of time on that question, but I think we have time for one more short question. And this one comes from Andy in San Francisco. Jerry, he says, what are some of your favorite financial and economic books? That's a great question.
Ooh, that is a good question. What are my favorite financial and economic books? Well, you know what? I read a lot of books back whenever I was writing my own book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation, did a lot of research and study. Some of the books that really stuck out to me were books like The Creature from Jekyll Island, which I quote several times in my book, written by G. Edward Griffin. If you haven't read that book, it's really worth your time. Fire in the Minds of Men by James Bullington. I'm actually reading through that book right now. It talks about the revolutionary faith, how this concept of revolution, which really rose up at the time of the French Revolution, but you could even throw in the Protestant Reformation into that time period as well, and say that it was all part of this revolutionary faith that was forged in the fire in the 1500s, 1600s, and coming forward. Yeah, this book really talks about the revolution, the concept of revolution and the revolutionary ideas, and how that itself has become a faith for so many. Very interesting book, and it obviously ties into economics. And then also Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley. Definitely worth a read. Well, friends, that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you so much for tuning in to our program each and every day right here on ftmdaily.com. I leave you with this final word as always. In Saudi Arabia, there's a saying, my father rode a camel. I drive a car. My son flies a jet airplane. And his son will ride a camel. If our modern oil-dependent world wants to avoid a similar self-imposed energy calamity, it is vital that we invest in alternative energy sources. Just something to think about. Remember, friends, when you want the truth, just follow the money. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. God bless.
All of the information contained on Follow the Money is strictly for informational and educational purposes. The views and opinions of our guests and sponsors, including Tom Cloud and Jay Peroni, are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of ftmdaily.com or Robinson Media Group, LLC. Jerry and Jennifer Robinson do hold their insurance licenses and may offer consulting on life insurance and fixed retirement income products. Jennifer Robinson is an investment advisor representative with Faith-Based Investor, LLC. Remember, never do your financial planning through podcast or radio. It's your money. Be wise. Do your due diligence and always consult a trusted financial professional before making any financial decisions.